Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started now that my dogs have stopped barking. Welcome everyone to the Washington Township Parent Council Network meeting for February 2022. I have an agenda here to just show you what we are going to cover this evening. It looks like a lot, but really the meat of our meeting is going to be focused on school board. I'll first start out with just an introduction about what Parent Council Network is, what we believe in, what our mission is. Then we'll hear an update from the administration. I know Dr. Taylor is on, but I also know Dr. Woodson may be joined. So I will get an update from the administration. We'll also get an update from our school board liaison, Deirdre George Davis. And then we will dive into our School Board 101 with the panel discussion. And we have 4 very special guests this evening. We have Deirdre George Davis, who is a current school board member. We have Don Kite, who is also a school board member. Sherry Harris, who was a school board member during 2008 to 2012, and then Lori Schlabach, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, who was a school board member from 2004 to 2008. So we did have a form for people to fill out if they wanted to, or an opportunity for parents to and caregivers to send in questions in advance. So we have about 7 questions that we received. So as we go forward, when we get to the panel, we'll focus on some of the questions we've already received, but we're happy to take questions in the chat as well. We'll also get an update about public policy and a Treasury update. And then we'll close out, and we'll also offer a chance if anybody wants to linger afterward to have sort of an informal conversation or just kind of chat more deeply if they want to hang out for a little bit longer about school board and really the focus of our evening. So let me start by just explaining what Parent Council Network is. Parent Council Network is an independent, nonpartisan group of parent and caregiver advocates of MSDWT students who represent a diverse community in Indianapolis and believe that high quality, fully and equitably funded public education under local democratic control is an investment in the future. Our mission is to represent and give district-wide voice to the educational interests of families and to strive to enhance the quality of public education in the township. We have 5 core beliefs. Number 1, our highest priorities are our children and their education. Number 2, we value public education and our community public schools. Number 3, parents have the right to meaningful participation in the process of public education. Number 4, diverse parent leadership, talent, influence, and perspective are all vital to excellent education. And 5, the community of Washington Township values and supports public schools and public education. 4 pillars support our mission. We inform and empower parents by providing objective and pertinent information regarding our schools. We collaborate with parents and educators to maintain the quality and highlight the diversity of our schools. We influence the future of public education in our school district by involving parents in public policy. And we advocate for all Washington Township students by electing school board members that we as parents and caregivers feel will move our district forward. We are structured in this way. Anyone who is a parent or caregiver in Washington Township is automatically an ad hoc member of Parent Council Network, but we do have a voting member structure which ensures representation from our various elementary, middle, and high school. So as you can see, we have a certain 10 per elementary, 12 per middle school, and 24 at the high school for a total of 130 possible voting members. We do have a form if you would like to be a voting member and commit to attending a majority of our meetings during the school year. You can sign up to be a voting member. And what that means is that you would vote on Parent Council Network business or bigger items that require a group, a vote from the entire organization. As always, you can find us on social media. Our Facebook is pretty active. Our Twitter is also out there. And we also have a website, msdwtparentcouncil.org. And so before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that our meetings are usually recorded. This one will be recorded. Please mute yourself unless you are speaking. We have decided that we cannot call on you if we don't know who you are or what your name is. So we encourage everyone to, so it doesn't say iPhone or, you know, I think I muted myself. Sorry. There's so many things clicking on my screen right now. I'm not sure what you heard, but really we just want to make sure that your name is visible and we know who we're calling on when we take questions or when we have our conversations. We ask you to be just as present as you can. We understand that you're parents and Zoom is kind of tricky. So don't worry, just mute if you need to. And just want to point out that we're tackling issues, not people. Any concerns regarding specific individuals are HR issues and will be directed to the administration. And I just also want to point out with our topic this evening, we are not discussing specific school board matters this evening. We're actually trying to understand what the job of the school board is and what the role of the school board is. So we aren't going to get into past votes or future votes. We're really just wanting to learn more about school board, what it is and why it's important. And lastly, we will respect each other's opinions and personal experiences. So I will just start by I reached out to the Indiana School Boards Association to get some basic, just general information to share with parents that wasn't super specific about school board members, but just really could give our parents and caregivers a general overview of what school board is and what the functions are. So what is a school board? Public school boards are democratically elected under local control of citizens to be leaders and champions for public education in their states and communities. In Indiana, there are a couple of exceptions. There are a couple of districts that have an appointed board. And we also note that boards of charter schools and private schools are not elected by their communities. The governance of Washington Township School Board is 5 people who are elected by the citizens who reside within the Washington Township boundaries. And that, there are more specifics to go into on that, but that's generally, where our school board comes from. The general functions and expectations of school boards to develop and approve district policies. We'd like to point out that most policies that come before the board are mandated by the legislature and the Department of Education, so they have to follow those rules. They aren't just, out in the Wild West doing whatever they want. They hire and annually evaluate the superintendent. They meet in public to consider the recommendations of the superintendent. They approve the district annual budget, and they act as community and school district liaisons. So they're out in the community and they represent the community. The scope and authority of school board members. There is often a misconception on the part of the community and sometimes even staff members and parents about the authority and scope of the work of school board members. First and foremost, Indiana statute only grants authority to school boards as a governing body. So this means that school boards derive their power and authority from the state. Board governance and school business is to be conducted in public through public votes. Individual board members are never granted authority to act on their own without the consent of the entire board. The board's role is governance, not administration. And the only employee who answers directly to the school board is the superintendent. And this is just something that the Indiana School Boards sent me as well. Hang on a second, I've made it so that I can't see my text. Okay. So through a research project conducted by the Iowa School Boards Association, as well as the National School Boards Association, they came up with 8 characteristics of effective school boards. Number 1, commit to a vision of high expectations for student achievement. Number 2, hold strong shared beliefs and values about what is possible for students. 3, remain accountability driven. 4, maintain a collaborative relationship with staff and community. 5, work to be data savvy. I'm not exactly sure what that means other than being used, just get used to working with lots of data. Number 6, work with their administrators to align and sustain resources. Number 7, lead as a united team with their superintendent. And 8, take part in team development and training with the superintendent. And before we jump into the panel, I just want to throw this out there, why school boards matter. They are the most local form of government that's accountable to the local communities. And so therefore, it's the most accessible form of government we have. School boards work to protect our most sacred democratic institution, the public schools, which ensure a strong foundation for our democracy. And they are in the best position to create strong communities by ensuring strong leadership, curriculum, and policies that shape a future generation. And I know that was a lot of information, but I just kind of wanted to give this broad overview so we kind of know where we're coming from when we talk about school boards. And so I am going to stop sharing my screen and let's maybe get started with meeting our panelists and really starting to get into the conversation here. Bear with me. Let's see. Okay, I'm trying to find the chat. Great. Okay, so do we have, first of all, I forgot. We need to do our updates. I'm sorry. So we need Dr. Taylor or Dr. Woodson to provide us with an administration update. My apologies. I'm very scattered. I was at the State House all day today, and I'm very absent-minded right now.
No, that's quite all right. That's quite all right.
It was quite a
very long day downtown.
Yeah, it was a zoo. There were over 214 people signed up to testify on one bill, so that was fun. All right, Dr. Taylor, let's pass it over.
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. And like I typically like to do, I like to give a little acknowledgement before I get into some pertinent matters important to the district. I just wanted to shout out to our school resource officers. Yesterday, we celebrated our National SRO Appreciation Day. So we celebrated our school resource officers a little bit. I want to just acknowledge their efforts and the work they do for our student, staff, and families to help keep our schools safe. I was over at Willow Lake doing a school visit on Monday, and one of the school resource officers, Officer Haskins, popped into one of the pod areas. I think it was the second grade pod there at Willow Lake, and to just see the reaction on some of the kids' faces, you could just tell that Officer Haskins was having a positive impact and building positive relationships with our students. It was really kind of sweet to see. And what many people may not know is that our SROs do engage in mentoring with lots of different students. Some are engaged in our after school programming, mentoring. Some mentor during the school day with, in particular at North Central, a freshman group. And so it's a lot more than just safety and security. And so I just wanted to lift up our school resource officers in this time, and also thank our community because we were able to add additional school resource officers thanks to your support in the last referendum. And so I just wanted to start with that acknowledgement right there. So if you happen to run into a school resource officer, be sure to thank them for all that they're doing for our community. Additionally, school hours and school calendar continue to be at the forefront of operational review as we consider revisions to both for next school year. I encourage all of you to listen to or attend the February 23rd board meeting, where we will have a detailed review of this work, as well as a recommendation for revised school hours for board consideration and discussion as an information item. Any proposed recommended changes will not be voted upon by our board until the March 9th board meeting. So in the meantime, I've listed in the chat a link that I encourage you to visit. That web page was just recently designed, and its intent is to be a summation of all the work that's gone into this review. And so it captures a timeline as well as video where you can hear from two experts. If you weren't able to listen to a dialogue we engaged in with a couple of experts in the area of sleep and school start times in last week's board meeting, we were able to capture that and get that published for our school communities to view. So please reference that link and video, and you will be all caught up in preparation for that February 23rd board meeting. So I just wanted to be sure to lift that up to you this evening. And then finally, the only other update we not the only other, but the other one I wanted to lift up is that we continue to pay close attention to what's happening down in the State House with reference to a few bills with major implications for public education. In particular, a school board passed a resolution last night in collaboration and a joint resolution with our Teachers Association in direct opposition to many of the components of House Bill 1134 and similar proposed legislation. And so that resolution is also accessible via our website and contains a lot of specific details as to what those particular components are that we are in opposition to. And so I would encourage and invite our parents and caregivers to take a close look at that when they are able to. So with that, I can turn it back over to you, Shelley, or answer any questions that anyone else may have at this time.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Dr. Taylor? I know that my kids would share their personal experience about how they're not awake until 10 in the morning at school. So that's my 2 cents. Anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I just sharing in the celebrations, the 6th grade wing at West Lane opened up this week, and I know everyone there was very excited about that. It's all positive feedback. So.
That's great. Okay, and I think I do not see Deirdre on. So we could wait, or we could ask Dawn to give us a school board update. It sounded like Dr. Taylor let us know already about the resolution. And I will say I was down at the State House today and saw the WTEA team there. And I know I had to leave, but I heard Sabra, Mrs. Gage, doing basically her speaking, but she also referenced the resolution and made multiple points surrounding that. So I thought that was favorable.
Yeah, I'm happy just to say a couple of words, Shelley, if you'd like. I can text Deirdre this. Sure. And some of what I'd start with is just to say, what he said, what Dr. Taylor said, because he covered obviously some of the big points and items that we've been dealing with, and that we have been dealing with, and that we're going to continue to deal with in the future. The big one right now, and one of the things that I'm sure that I don't know if it'll come up in context or not, but both Lori Schlabach and Sherry Harris will talk about this evening, or maybe make reference to, is when big issues are before the board, the amount of email that we receive, typically don't get a whole lot of snail mail, but the amount of email that we receive, texts and phone calls, really can ramp up. And that's starting now with school hours. And as I'm sure you folks know from if you're listening to the meetings, and I know folks from Parent Council Network do that regularly, and thank you for your interest and involvement. But if you're listening to the meetings, one of the things that you'll see and hear is that there are some of the visions that you might expect in terms of opinion are somewhat predictable. It doesn't mean that folks don't hold those views, and really believe in what they're saying, but you'll find a split with, elementary parents, particularly those who all of their kids are in that point in their lives, tending to have questions about the proposed time change. High school parents, including some on their way out, generally being very supportive of that change. And then even teachers being somewhat divided by level. And this is one of the challenges we may talk about tonight, depending upon what everybody else in the panel thinks about how you deal with issues when you're not necessarily receiving the amount of feedback, or you're not sure if the feedback that you're getting is representative of what the majority of people think. So that's the big thing we're dealing with now. Obviously, we've been dealing with construction as an issue for a while now. That I think things are going pretty smoothly when you consider how much construction is going on in the district and how long it's been going on, and then the fact that it's going to continue in the future. And there are other issues, obviously, that come up from time to time that I'm sure we'll address. But other than that, like I said, Dr. Taylor gave a very good summary of big things that are going on right now. But I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any issues.
Yeah, this is our moment. If anybody has any questions about what the school board's up to and any further discussion on what Don just pointed out, feel free to ask in the chat or raise your hand. Let's see. Oh, there I go. Okay. And I do want to say too, I think we might be competing with other events this evening. I know there was a big event at North Central, and there were some other things happening, and I know people were at the State House today. So in any case, we're glad you're here. I already absent-mindedly perhaps started the intro to school board presentation. So I meant to do that now, but we can always go back to that, and we can always share our slides. Really, the goal of that was just to kind of start the conversation about the role of a school board. I think we've seen in the news and even in surrounding areas, and sometimes even in our own school board experience, that there's perhaps a misconception about what school board does. Also, we need to be clear on what school board does not do. And I think that those are important. That's an important place to start. So without further ado, we do have a great small panel tonight, but I think it's perfect for our conversation. Hopefully Deirdre will jump on at some point. I'm not sure if she had technical difficulties. But so we have Don Kite, we have Sherry Harris, and we have Lori Schlabach, who are all here with us this evening. And Don is a current school board member, and Sherry and Lori served. Sherry, you can tell us, and Lori, you can tell us more. But so I think we'll just start by maybe doing each person maybe giving us an introduction about just your time on the school board and who you are, and just kind of a basic introduction before we jump into questions. So why don't we start with Lori, and I'll let you go first. And
seems like I served a million years ago in some respects, but Don and I did overlap by 2 years. So I'm not sure if that says so much about how long ago I served or how long Don has been on the board. One of those two. I've been involved with public education and school boards for a very long time. And I told Scott this the other night. My father served on the school board in the community I grew up in Wisconsin for probably 30 years, different school boards and districts we lived in. And so I grew up steeped in this school board situation in small districts and in large districts we lived in. And so it wasn't new to me when I ran for the board in Washington Township. And a lot of times the people that run tend to have older children, but my children were actually quite young at the time. I had a first grader and a toddler when I ran for school board. And that added some interesting challenges picking up on that. But I still think that board service is extremely important. And you had some good points from the from the School Board Association. So I hope as we get through this and get through our introductions, I would love to talk about some of those things in more detail.
Great. Sherry? You are muted.
I grew up in the district, and then my son went to school here, and so and I'm the youngest of 7, and all of my siblings graduated from North Central. So I have just a long, kind of deep association with our particular school district, and so I just felt very passionate about it, and being on the school board was a really good way to feel like I had something that I could give to that process. I think whether or not it works out that way depends on a lot of different things. But my son was, I think, in 5th grade when I ran. I had the unusual circumstance of having a 4.5-year term because they changed the terms while I was on the school board for the year that I was elected. I mean, it was not everyone, I don't think, had that extra 6 months, which when you're geared for 4 years, 6 months takes a little extra stamina. But I loved it, and I actually kind of miss it. But so Don.
Pass the baton to Don.
Don and I also overlapped, which was fun.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be an overlapping joke that's going to come out of this, I know. Yeah, I would say, you know, I would echo what both Lori and Sherry said. You know, I did not come from this community. You can't help where you're born. And I was born in Kokomo, Indiana, of all places. And then my father was in labor relations. So we moved quite a bit when I was young. He worked for companies like Kaiser Jeep, American Motors. And so we would go to, you know, we'd live in different communities, lived in Baltimore for a long time, lived in Indianapolis, kind of back and forth. And, but when we finally settled, you know, when you get married, perhaps not for everybody at that moment, but and then have children, and you find a community that you really love, which for us was Washington Township. You really want to be a part of things and be a positive part of things. Obviously, you know, folks who sit in their big armchairs at home and write negative emails and all of that have the right to do that as well. But it's just nice to be part of a group of people who really care. And I mean that broadly too, the school board, but with the groups that really care about what's going on in our township, parent council and you know, wonderful teachers, administrators who really care and tend to stick around in Washington Township. You know, so it's great to be a part of that. And I've benefited, like I think most of us have, you know, Dr. White, who Lori could tell you more about than the rest of us. But Dr. White used to say that we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And I consider myself fortunate, you know, to have worked with and learned from Lori, and the same thing with Sherry and with Deirdre, you know, a new member to the board, but you still learn an awful lot if you really are truly open to listening to different perspectives, which sounds like Sunday school, but it's true. I mean, if you really can listen, doesn't mean you're always going to agree. Sometimes you can very passionately disagree, but I think on our board historically over time, we've gotten along and we've learned a lot from each other and grown and been better board members, hopefully.
Great. So maybe just a quick, I mean, you kind of touched on this question, you all kind of in your own way touched a little bit on this question, but the first one we have is, why did you want to be on Washington Township School Board? So really just what drove you to be involved as a school board member or to run for school board in Washington Township? And maybe Lori, I'll just go to you for that and we'll just go around.
Oh, wow. So I served on the very first referendum campaign we had before I was on the board. And part of the reason I did that is because I love this district. And actually, long before we had children, my husband and I chose this school district. We bought a house here purposely. I'm not originally from Indiana, but while attending DePauw University, I was classmates with a lot of North Central grads. And they introduced me to North Central and the community they grew up in. And I was amazed. I mean, these kids, they were all smart. My classmates were smart, but the North Central kids were so incredibly well prepared. And I think that still carries through with a lot of our kids, not all of them, but I think that does still ring true. But it was amazing to me too, that this district was at that time diverse, but certainly not as diverse as it is now. And I was amazed at this incredible district that had so much potential and could be the public schools that really this nation needed. That we were this microcosm of our entire United States right here in Washington Township. And so when people started talking to me about running for school board, I was like, yes, because if we can make this work in this place, with all the challenges you have in an urban district and the diversity, I mean, this is where you do it, right? And I also do have to own up to the fact that I was a teacher for a while, and I student taught in Washington Township at Northview and North Central. So I knew the district and was very proud of the teachers that were here and the curriculum that was here and what was going on. So you know, that whole passion for public education came together with a community that I love. And that's really what drove me to do it. And a few people really pushing me and saying, yes, you can do this when you have a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Thank you. That's good. That's really good information. So let's introduce Deirdre, who's joining us, and also Deirdre, maybe introduce yourself, and then how about take a stab at the question: why did you want to be on Washington Township School Board?
Good evening, everyone. I apologize for being tardy. The life of an epidemiologist during a pandemic. So I'm Deirdre George Davis. I've been in this district since 2008. I actually moved here less than 36 hours before my son started first grade. He's now in college. So when I discovered I was moving here, we strategically looked for a school district. My husband believed very strongly in public schooling. I'm a child of private school, but I grew up in New York, and public school was a very different beast in the 70s and 80s in New York than it is here. And I was very open to public school. And everybody said, go to Carmel. And I was immediately turned off. And so based on where we were going to live, we visited the school that our son would attend. And I took him with me, and he climbed into Suzanne Zeibert's lap, and he did all of the Q&A. And I knew right then we were home. And I should say that I knew that because I gave birth to the shyest extrovert you can ever meet. He loves people, but he's very, he has a hard time getting into the fold, but once he's in, he's great. So from PTO to the foundation, now Advancement Center, I just kind of worked my way up, and not having any family here, Washington Township became our family. And as my children moved, I then had another child. And as they moved through the Washington Township system, I noticed that my son wasn't necessarily a high achiever, but he wasn't struggling either. He just kind of sat there in the middle, and everyone just allowed him to do it. Well, his brother came behind him, and his brother is considered, gifted and talented, as they say. But he is also a child with special needs. So I found myself in the unique position with one child falling face first into the achievement gap, with another child who needed who needed special attention, but was getting straight A's. And so I actually was approached about running for school board probably every time there was an election since 2012. Yes, because it was right before Nicholas started middle school. And keep in mind, he's in college. And so it was a very resounding, absolutely not. And part of that was because I felt like my voice was too strong. I come with very strong opinions, and sometimes I don't know how to tactfully relay that. And so I said, I'm probably the worst person you can put on a school board. I'm going to offend everybody. Absolutely not. And so I like to joke with members of Parent Council Network. You probably will think that it's like morbid humor. My father actually was very ill in summer of 2020, not COVID related. And I was on this search committee for someone to look for someone for school board, not realizing that I was being vetted. And so when I got the ask, I like to tease and say, you guys caught me at a weak moment because my dad was sick and I was focusing, and I just said, yeah, just to make you stop asking me. But then I realized, wait, what did I just say? And so, I went to my husband and I said, hey, they're seriously asking me to run for school board. And he said, you should absolutely do it. They've been asking you for 8 years. You'd be perfect at it. I can't think of anybody more passionate about this district than you. And I constantly tell people there is no place in Indiana I will educate my children other than Washington Township, and I haven't. If I lived in Indianapolis, this is where they were educated. And I just truly love this district, and it is it is ingrained in my soul to make sure that this district remains a top district, and that our children do well, that your children do well. It's just, I don't know, I feel like it's one of my babies. And so anybody who has kids knows that you do everything you can for your babies. So that's what led me to go forward with the yes, and just kind of, I'm here now, and it's been a whirlwind. Oh my God, it's been the craziest 14 months of my life, but I would not change a thing. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
That was great.
because I
That was
kind of
great.
threw two
That's great.
answers in together.
Awesome. No, it was very good. Thank you. And Sherry, why did you want to be on the Washington Township School Board? Oh, you're
Okay.
Yep, there you go.
So when I was a member of Parent Council and was planning to support the candidate, whoever it was, and there was a little bit of a gap in not quite finding the right candidate, I guess. And just at that time, there, this was 2008, and there was one of the founders of the local Tea Party was on the board at that time, and had 2 other Tea Party members they were going to run for the board, which would have given them a majority. I don't know if any of them had ever had kids in the school district, but I don't think anyone had kids in the school district at that time. And when my husband said, why would you want to do that? I said, I really believe that if I don't, that not because of me, but because of who was gearing up to run, that our son's quality of education will decline, and I think we'll notice it within a year or less. So it felt like there was a need, and I felt like the depth of context I had in the community would be helpful. And I kind of have always been kind of a policy nerd anyway. And so the idea of having a lot of meetings to go to and talk about, you know, kind of serious issues didn't bother me at all. It kind of appealed to me. So that's pretty much, you know, I don't know if there had been people antagonistic to the school on the board before that the board went up before it, the person I'm referring to. But I know it's increased since then. And so I think it's a really important thing to just recognize that there are people in the community who want the local public school system to succeed. And there are, it's shocking to me to have to say this or to even believe it, but there are people who are actively working to undermine and destroy public education. And I felt like that was really kind of starting when I was getting on the board. And that was my reaction to it, was that's not right. That's so not right. And I had no idea that it was the beginning of a much longer trajectory of that. And I am so grateful that parent council has not only stayed together, but really strengthened. I could tell from your opening, Shelley, that you have developed the mission statement and the goals and the so much further than where it was when I was on parent council. And we were working on it even then. There was, gosh, when I was on parent council, I remember Sid coming in, former school board member coming in and working with parent council to try and define the goals, and not just the goals, but to try and define what to look for in a candidate for school board, and the importance of that, including things like involvement in the system prior to the decision to run. And so there really are ways to vet people that can sift out the supporters from the naysayers, if that's a fair thing to say. I mean, supporting the district to me doesn't mean I agree with every decision that's ever been made, or with every person who's ever made a decision. It doesn't mean that I think it's the perfect place. It's not, you know, rose-colored glasses, but it does mean I believe in education and I believe in public education. And I think that our community would be a much worse place without a quality public education. Like what I used to tell people is, so while I was running for school board, my father died while I was during the campaign. And then, and my mother was in a nursing home. And I would see the people who came into contact with my mom. She had dementia, so she didn't have all of her faculties about her. And I would see the people who came into contact with her through the nursing home. And when people talked about, you know, getting rid of public education, I would just say to them, or want to say to them, usually I would say to them, because I'm like that, I would say, who do you think is going to take care of you when you reach a certain age? And what kind of education would you like for them to have? I wanted the people taking care of my mom to not just, you know, maybe speak English, but I wanted them to have thought about values and art and music and have humanities. I wanted them to be whole well-rounded, educated people, not, I mean, because frankly, most of the caregivers that I saw probably maybe had a high school education. So if the service community is going to be made up of people who have the skills that they have in large part gotten from high school. And so what kind of service do you want to get as a person in the future? Because that's what you're going to get.
That's a big why. And quickly, Dawn, do you want to add anything? And then we can get to some of the questions that are popping up in the chat.
Sure. I love the quickly, Don. I know I'm known for going on and on, so I will try to keep this really quick. couple points. First of all, Sherry made me think of something that Laura used to talk about. And when you would hear Lori talk about it, it was like seeing tears in Bob Taylor's eyes when he would watch the counterpoints. It was just as an intellectual of a point, but also something that really you could feel emotionally. Sherry used to talk about how public schools really are, and it's not just, these aren't just words, they really are. It is where most of us learn the foundations of what it means to be an American, what it means to participate, what it means to have an education where we can grow from where we find ourselves to hopefully being able to be self-sustaining or do as much as we can for ourselves, be able to have those conversations when you go out on dates where you can talk about something other than, just your favorite sport or something. You can have intelligent conversations with other humans. So it is something that obviously really motivates us to be a part of that. For me personally, my wanting to get involved in the school board run the first time really goes back to dating my wife. My wife is a teacher by training, and she would talk to me about issues. We'd be out on our dates, going various places. And since she was dating me, maybe they weren't the top of the line restaurants. They were somewhere in that middle tier, but we would go out and be talking about things like people do on their dates. And she would talk about, as a teacher and as a special ed teacher specifically, how it always shocked her when people would come to her and say things like, well, do you really think it's necessary to give a diploma to a special education student? And she would hear things like that and it would shock her. We would talk about some of these issues. And so as an attorney, which was just my training, I became extremely interested in educational issues. So when the opportunity arose, I eventually ran the first time. I was going to run 2 years later, but there were kind of storm clouds gathering about, the particular school board member that was referenced a little bit earlier, and others wanting to be on our board. And as you hear even today, people talk about wanting to so-called, take over the board. If I can address one thing that I saw in the chat, just try to be a little bit helpful in this. One of the things that's very hard to quantify, and every board member may have a different answer to this, but I can tell you, and Dr. Woodson was addressing some of this in the chat, but it is true that kind of the minimum, if you want to think of it that way, as far as being a school board member, and then it kind of goes up from there. So kind of is it a Chevy Neon? The Chevy Neon is you get the materials to prepare for the board meeting, and you read those materials and you show up at the board meeting and you wing it. That's kind of the entry level, and you have to show up at executive sessions or else people are going to look at you like, why aren't you a part of, the sessions that just go on with the board, and then whomever is invited to address the board. But that kind of Chevy Neon wouldn't necessarily take that many hours in a week. We have a tendency, some of our meetings go really long, but let's say a meeting goes 3 hours. And let's say you take a couple hours to prepare for it because you're a quick reader. That's kind of the minimum. But if you're going to be more involved in what's going on in the district, and most of our school board members are, they're not only attending executive sessions, maybe they're calling about issues that are going to be presented at the next meeting, or they're doing their own research. That is not at all surprising in a Washington township. Our board, and I'm speaking quickly to try to move on, Shelley, but our board is, I think, known for being, and Laura used to talk about this as well, known for being one of the better school boards in the state of Indiana. That's not just, puffing up our shoulders. It's really true. We are prepared. You don't tend to see any board members who haven't read everything, thought through questions. We try not to just interrupt each other to show, hey, I'm just as smart when we're asking questions. If questions have been answered, we move on. So I think we work well collaboratively, but there's all that part of it, preparing for board meetings, preparing for and attending executive sessions. But then most of us, whether we still have children in the schools or grandchildren or have no children in the school district, are also trying to be present at different things that are going on in the community, trying to have conversations with folks. When you're board president, I think it's Ms. Strawbridge that asked this question, when you're board president, not about board president specifically, but about work on the board. When you're board president, we don't just rotate it. Every year we look for the person or persons who want to be officers, who have the time, who have the interest, and who the board thinks can do it. There have been people who have not pursued it because it wasn't in their work plan for the year or what have you. But when you're board president, for folks who are thinking about all these things down the road, it's kind of like a year of board work on steroids. We have some things that are built in our district that make it better. We have a superintendent and administration who work very hard to make sure board members have materials and are informed. And so even though they'll tell us there's no such thing as a stupid question, I think most board members really believe that they believe there's no such thing as a stupid question. So that lets us let our guards down a little bit, and ask good questions. But I'd become very involved in the district in other ways, and I wanted to be a part of decision making at that level. And as both Lori and Sherry said, we had some kind of overlapping reasons to want to be more involved in the school district.
Thank you. So one of the questions in the chat is, what does a day in the life of a school board member look like? And I know that that might be different for each person, depending on what your day job is, how you operate, how you plan ahead. You definitely, I believe, get information ahead of time that you need to review before meetings and things. So does anybody want to, maybe one current board member and one past member maybe want to mention what a day in the life looked like for them? Deirdre?
I'll jump in. Let's see, let's start with a board meeting week, because every other week looks different. So the 2 board meeting weeks for me look very different from the non-board meeting weeks. And this is not including exec sessions that pop up for various reasons. So I'm an epidemiologist. I work for the Indiana Poison Center. So right off the bat, I have a very high stress day job because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. And I do surveillance for poison exposures related to COVID right now, which when you have people who are injecting bleach and doing all sorts of strange things, that's a very interesting position to be in. So my 8:30 to 4:30, if all goes well, is the Poison Center. Before that, and while Noah's eating his breakfast, I'm usually checking all of my board emails. So that way I can have that off my plate before I get into the throes of work. Sometimes I actually do leave my board computer open because sometimes things pop up that might need a quick yes or no. And I can say the 2 board presidents that I've been under have been really good at, hey, check your email real quick if they don't get the response when they need it, and then I can just jump over. So on top of that, I'm very actively involved in my sorority. I am actually the mentor for a middle school group, for girls middle school group in my sorority. And I'm also a member of Jack and Jill, which is a mom's organization that focuses on a lot of things right now. We do legislative stuff, we do STEM stuff, and I'm actively involved on the board there too, as well as other community involvement. So just to throw that out there, I have not relinquished any of that, and I don't feel that I'm stretched too thin by adding that to the board. I also have a college student that lives in North Carolina, as well as a brand new middle schooler and a husband who works in finance. So we are a very busy household. At the end of a non-meeting week, that's typically when you get the notification that your board docs are ready. I am super impressed at my fellow board members who can jump right on the board docs. I usually read my board docs on Sunday while Noah is at swimming. And then for me, I typically read them and then meet with Don for any questions or just kind of clarifications. And then I actually read them again. But that's a Deirdre thing. I just like to really make sure. I'm sure Dr. Whitson might have a little smile on her face right now because I'm the question board member. And I usually send emails that are about 5 pages long with questions just to make sure that I understand what the discussion is going to be about and how I want to proceed, and to make sure that I'm not asking any questions that catch anybody off guard. So then the next week, we have board meetings. Board meetings, as you know, run from an hour to 3 hours to you get the work done. It just depends on what's going on. So even though I'm an epidemiologist, and even at one point when I first jumped into this position, I was probably working 12 hours a day. But I found little niches of time to kind of pull the board work together. It kind of just for me is I write everything down. I have my calendar sitting in front of me. I have both computers open in front of me. And it's kind of, I tell people it's like parenting when you have more than one child. You just kind of balance it out and you tag team a lot of things. I feel like I have great support in my partners on the board. So when I feel like something doesn't make sense, they're a great team. We have great discussions. So that's a typical day, both, for me, it's work 8:30 to 4:30, and I really try to stay focused on work. And then outside of that, I kind of balance everything around my 8:30 to 4:30. Hopefully that cleared it up a little bit. I know I bounced around a little bit there.
Yeah, I think it would just depend mostly on everyone's individual life, right?
Yeah,
Just how
and
you manage the extra work.
yeah, and interestingly enough, I believe we're all in 5 different professions. So
Right. Right.
yeah.
Right. Lori.
So I thought I'd add a slightly different perspective to that, because you talked about day in the life, but there's a cycle in boardmanship, and there's one time when you're going to be extremely busy, and it doesn't happen in every board member's term. And that is if you have to hire a superintendent and the work escalates, because it's the one time where it's the biggest job you do as a school board member is hire and fire a superintendent and evaluate a superintendent. And so if you are on the board during a term where you would be hiring a superintendent, you're going to be even busier, and it's a big deal. And one of the things about running for school board is you never know what's going to come up in your term. And so when you're evaluating school board members, watch out for that candidate that has a special issue, and that's the reason they have a thing that they're really running for that's current right now, because there's no telling what's going to happen in that 4 years and what they're going to have to decide. So, one of the things I look for in potential board members is someone that cares about the big picture enough that no matter what issue is going to come up, they're going to look at all sides of it and be prepared for what comes down the pike.
That's a really good point. Anything can happen, right? As the current board members know, for sure. So can we talk just briefly about the fact that school boards being on school board is service, and we know that school board members get paid theoretically. Does anybody want to tell me what school board members what they get paid and why it's important to still be involved in the school board even with that level of pay?
Yeah, I can jump in for a second and then might hear from others. This is one of those issues, and I'm going to answer it just as frankly as I can. I don't have the exact amount on me. I can tell you that you get paid a kind of a combination of a yearly stipend or amount, and then per board meeting, you also get paid a small stipend. It's set the same as the city council. That's kind of what we're anchored to. And we have a tradition in Washington Township of trying very hard to have our executive sessions before or after board meetings, so that the taxpayers are only paying school board members for one meeting if we can help it. Which that just makes sense. It won't always happen because if we have one of these marathon school board meetings that really goes on for a long time, it's not only not necessarily fair to staff to continue to have to stay, or even some members of the staff to have to stay, but also it's kind of trying for board members as well. So if you think about board members, my life tends to be pretty mixed up. I can work for 4 hours, do school board work for a few hours, work for 4 hours, try to be a husband and a grandpa and do the best job, and father, do the best job that I can at those jobs, and then work on school board and then work for more hours. But some people have, of course, jobs that don't have any flexibility. And so when they come from a very busy day from that job to the school board, or folks who are staying home with children come from that very busy job to a school board meeting, and that school board meeting goes on for 3 hours, and then they're going to have an executive session where they're going to talk about some obscure financial issue or what have you, that can really make for a long day. So we've tried to combine them, but sometimes it just won't work for schedules. But basically, the financial remuneration is something like $5,000 or $6,000 a year in a really busy year, and that doesn't happen every year, but that's kind of what you make. You put a lot more time than that amount of time into it. But I can remember, this is one of those times where you learn from your fellow school board members. I thought, what a great idea, since we don't run for the school board to make money. Back when I was just first coming onto the board, I thought, why don't we do the same thing that Sid McNeely had the board do, which I thought was it when she was president, leaving the board, of having the board vote to eliminate insurance, because health insurance is so expensive. 5 people times health insurance is maybe paying a substantial portion of a teacher, not the entire teacher, but my point is that was an expensive benefit. So I thought, why don't we just, like some other boards have talked about it, eliminate the board salary component? And I had folks on the board talk to me away from other people, which I thought was great, and I learned from it, and said, let's not do that, because this still allows different folks on the board whose economic lives are different to be able to pay for seminars, to pay for parking, be able to pay for copying, whatever, all those things that go along with being on the school board. And I thought that was wise counsel. I'm not saying if I wanted it, it would have changed, but I thought that was wise counsel, and quickly got off of that horse because I was persuaded by what somebody else said. Imagine that in America, but it still happens. And so that's the main answer to that question. It's a lot of hours for the money. I think truly that the amount of time that the average school board member puts in, not on that low end, not the Chevy Neon, but the average school board member in our township, that's more hours. That amount of time, you're probably looking at Wendy's drive-through wages if you really were to break that down. So if you're thinking about this job for the money, you're not thinking of it the right way, and nobody does.
I used to call our school board salary a North Central High School Student Scholarship Fund, because pretty much my whole salary went to paying with young children, paying for babysitters who happened to be students at North Central to watch my children. And, the interesting thing about it, in some parts of the world, school boards aren't typically paid. And where I grew up in Wisconsin, school boards weren't paid. And my dad kept talking about up there, because there was a time period where we were both serving on school boards in separate states. They were having trouble getting women to run for school board. And I said, Dad, you're not paying school board members. How are these women going to arrange for childcare when they have to be at board functions or somewhere? It's a big deal. And they actually went against the grain and they added the salary. So I thought it was a scholarship fund for babysitters at North Central.
That's so true. I mean, you aren't necessarily doing it for the money. Okay, so go ahead, Sherry.
I would like to add something on that, which is that I think that I was paid in tickets to plays and musicals.
Right, there you go.
Opportunities to hear the counterpoints a couple times a year, in thank you notes from kids every time I visited a school, in invitations to the district's holiday party where retired teachers would come, and you would get to hear great stories. I mean, the monetary payment is not significant, but the payment in community capital, I guess, is more significant, I think.
That is an excellent point. I think that's an excellent point. So one of the other questions, and this is kind of more of a nuts and bolts type question too. What type of support did you have to help you get up to speed once you were elected to the school board? I mean, some people are coming from all different places with different levels of experience. Some people are financial people, some people are, you know, strong in other ways. And so in governance and Robert's rules or whatever. So what resources were available to you, or what is the process? How do school board members kind of get up that learning curve initially when they first get elected?
Can I start if I promise to make a 30-second answer?
Sure.
I think if you time this, you find out I'm not trying to eat the most time, so I'm keeping it low. For one thing, let's say you came to the board, hopefully as a positive person who really wants to make a difference, cares about schools. You've not been just a thorn in the side of the administration and teachers and everybody else. But everybody can have obviously opinions, and you can have dissenting opinions. But let's say you come with that mindset. The administration will have, along with, used to be all board members, then it went to just the board president, superintendent. I personally don't like that idea. I think I like all board members welcoming a new board member or board members, and they will have an orientation, which the administration obviously drives that, and they will have the CFO or CBO for the school corporation talk to folks about financial considerations and issues and the different funds. They will have other cabinet level folks, superintendent, assistant superintendent, whomever, meet with. Hopefully, like I say, I'm always an advocate for all the school board members there because it's a chance to come together too, but at least the new school board member, and give them a lot of material in a big monster binder and try to give it to them in bitefuls as opposed to through the fire hose. Everybody brings a different answer to the learning curve question. There are some folks who literally have had very little to do with the school corporation other than that very important job, I'm acknowledging it, but of being in the stands for their own children. Other people have been involved in a lot of other things, whether it's PTOs, parent council, used to be the foundation, now the advancement center. Folks find involvement in different areas, some in many other areas. Just depends on the school board members. Some have very little curve, although there's still a curve for everyone. Some have a huge steep learning curve.
Would anyone else like to chime in on that support issue?
So when you join the board, you have at least a few other members that have been on the board at least 2 years, right? So your fellow school board members, I mean, really, when I came on, people like Sid McNeely and John Hunter, who had served for a while, I mean, they were a great help, no matter how much you know about education coming on. Just knowing the ins and outs of a particular district and the help of my fellow board members in Washington Township was huge. And professional organizations, there is the State School Board Association, and they offer workshops and things that are helpful. And the national conference, if the school district can afford to send members, is amazing. And I learned an awful lot attending some of those educational opportunities. Those were very helpful things.
Yeah, excellent. The School Boards Association is quite supportive and provides a lot of resources, which I think is super helpful. I mean, they helped us with our just kind of priming us for this conversation today.
Yeah, their legislative people interpreting current law have been, and policy, are incredibly helpful.
Well, and so maybe segue into that a little bit. I mean, what is the saying? The state legislature is the biggest school board in the state. I think that's kind of what, as those of us have been around this and kind of been asking questions, we understand that, while the school board is elected and they're in charge of being good stewards and fiduciary, have fiduciary obligations to the district, it's really the state legislature in many ways, and the Department of Education via the State Board of Education, making some of these hoops that you have to jump through or requirements that you have to accomplish as a school board member. So maybe talk a little bit about that. I don't even know how to hone that into anything other than, I guess maybe what did you learn about when you became a school board member? When did you learn or understand, the power that the state legislature has?
I'd like to
Carrie.
start that one if that's okay. I can't remember the exact sequence of things, but I think it was maybe even while I was running for school board that they added the circuit breaker, which kind of tied the risks of school boards and
Property
districts.
tax caps, right?
Property tax caps, yes. And so, I mean, right from the start, right from the get-go, it was what, it's boggling to me that that the state of home rule and the party of home rule ignores that when it comes to school boards, but it can get political fast. And one of my, the other thing was while I was on the board, and you think that some groups are more friendly to what you want in a school district, but while I was on the board, we had I'm going to say Democratic presidents who had really bad school what's his name? What is the position I'm trying to say? Heads of education at the
Secretary of Education, yeah.
The Secretary of Education, I would say one of the, well, not the worst, but there's been worse since then, but really not helpful.
Yeah.
Not helpful. The race to the top thing, not helpful. So there is a lot of opportunity to object and protest. And I know when I was on the board, I really tried to push the board to pass resolutions to send to the legislature about various initiatives they were trying to start.
And we're still seeing that,
Good.
yesterday, for example.
Good.
Yeah, so that's good. Anybody else?
There were times that I just couldn't wait for the session to end. It's like, please end now before they do more damage.
We are, school boards are, as you kind of started out talking about this, Shelley, and it's absolutely true. And anybody in the school board who forgets this is really making a mistake. We are creatures of statute. They can eliminate us with one fell swoop. They can have just, bulk up the staff at the Indiana Board of Ed. I don't think anybody wants that, but they can do that. They can eliminate all of us. They can restrict us even more. Local control changes. I agree with Lori. I think every single session of the General Assembly, I'm always happy when it ends. Like, positions talk about do no harm. I think the General Assembly starts out saying do more harm, at least to public ed. And I think it makes us all feel like there's this constant kind of sword hanging over our heads. People who are trying to do good work. There are great reasons for local control, and there are people circling out there looking to monetize education. It's no secret. One of the things I really want to speak to, and I really mean it, just in a sentence, is parent council makes a difference in that regard. One of the questions that I know, Shelley, you've talked about sometimes in the past is, what difference does a parent council endorsement make in this process? And the WTA endorsement, what does that matter? And it matters a hell of a lot. It still is always up to the candidate. I've never forgotten Dr. White coming into a parent council meeting and chastising parent council for not getting someone elected who was running. And I thought, well, that's the candidate's job, because parent council is not a union. Once they vote for a candidate, you can't beat them into supporting that candidate and trudging through fields and such on muddy days and passing out campaign literature and making phone calls. But if a candidate really has parent council behind them, not just the endorsement, but having that group of volunteers and that network of people in our community who care, who can get out a message that is inconsistent with one of the messages that's being circulated. that we don't care and that we're not making decisions that are intended to address a lot of problems. Parent council matters on, and they've won elections and continue to do so where they're outspent, candidates are outspent on yard signs and such. And parent council's endorsement matters. So does the WTEA's. And when candidates get both endorsements, that really helps them to get at least closer to being elected. Doesn't do the whole job for them, but it sure as heck gets them closer.
Well, and I just want to throw it out there that so for those who aren't familiar with parent council and in the beginning where we talk about one of our goals of parent council is to elect school board members that we feel will move our district forward from the perspective of parents and caregivers in the district. I just want to point out that what that is it's not Shelley.
Right.
It's not Kelly. It's not one. What we do is we put out a call for people to join our school board candidate committee. And typically that committee is comprised of not always perfect, but an excellent cross-section of the district, both geographically, racially. It's very important for us to have that balance and really be a representative cross-section of the district that is doing the work of researching the candidates, learning more about them, and making then a recommendation to the broader parent council. And so I think that's really important to point out. And we actually do, I'll just maybe point this out now, we do have a form, it's a Google form for a sign up for people who might be interested in being involved in that process. We really think it's important for parents to have a voice in this process. And so I'm not sure if one of our board members might be able to drop that link in the chat, and we'll also share it on our social media and in our newsletter for parents that are interested in getting involved, whether it's, oh, there it is. Thank you, Kelly, have a voice. We appreciate that. So there's the form where people can sign up to just, hey, I want to learn more about what this school board candidate committee is, what it does, what this process looks like. It's early, it's February. The election is not until November, but we really would like to start the ball rolling and get parents involved in that. So I think that now is as good a time as any, right? When we had that comment. So one more, I'll ask one additional stock, not stock, but what we had submitted online, and then we can open up just a broader discussion if people want to do that. What do you wish you would have known before running for school board? So maybe each of you wants to take that, or maybe somebody doesn't want to take it, it's fine. Just feel free to unmute.
I literally just had this conversation with my husband 2 days ago. I wish I had known the true emotional investment I would have made in this. I've always been very passionate about our school district. I think being on school board has really brought that to the surface. Because I find that no matter where I am talking about Washington Township and school board, and like sometimes wanting to do this, and just I never realized just how much I would throw my heart into the ring. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I haven't decided that yet, but I wish I had known just how my emotions would have flurried being on school board, and just how I take to heart every single issue. And, when anything happens in the district and we're notified, I have some sort of emotional response to it, where I'm like, oh my gosh. And then well, do we know what happened to that child, and what are we doing to support that child? And so I kind of have adopted 11,000 children. So I've taken on the mama bear role, and I wish I had known just how hard and fast that would have happened to me.
Well, and you've had the pandemic, and just such a just enormous layer of extra difficulty piled on. And I think that's noteworthy for the current board
Yeah,
members.
if I
anyway.
can use Dr. Woodson's word, complexities. I kind of
Yes.
wish I had known the various complexities. You know, you hear about stories of what is happening with our students in their day to day, but to actually delve in and really, you know, sometimes you experience it with them. And so, yeah, I wish I had known just how hard and fast that whole mama bear thing would have hit me being on the school board.
I was going to chime in. I don't, it's not exactly the same thing, but I think one of the things that surprised me, it's not a what I wish I'd known because look how bad this went. It's more of a pleasant surprise. The older I get, and this, I really mean this too. So if I die tomorrow, you could remember, this was Don's thought on this. But the older I get, the more I appreciate kind of, what happens in combination, folks. So when I was a young lawyer, as an example, I mean, I'll just go ahead and say it. I wanted my name on the brief. I wanted to be the guy who won that case. I wanted to be the guy who other lawyers would pull into something. And that was really important. And I want, like all of us, you want also to individually achieve or feel that, that kind of positive feeling that comes from doing well in whatever you've picked in life. The older I get, the more I appreciate, some great singer singing with, and I'm not saying she isn't by implication, but Frank Sinatra singing with, Britney Spears or whatever, and Willie Nelson singing with some other. I mean, I appreciate those things that happen in combination. The symbiosis is really important. When school boards are working well, it's the best feeling. That doesn't mean we all vote the same, although that happens a lot, but it is the best feeling because you know that people with slightly different opinions or very strongly different opinions have come to some sort of a consensus. For some people who are watching it, that may be really boring, but for us, a lot goes into every single decision. And with a lot of help from the administration, because they're the trained educators, for the most part, typically we are not. Occasionally we have people on the board like Lori Schlabach, Tony Deswaner, others who have taught, had some experience with that as well as other experiences in life. But oftentimes the school board members are not educators per se, right? And so we get a lot of help from administration. When school boards are not functioning well together, it's horrible. And we've had different experiences serving some of us with different board members who have made it more challenging. But we really do, we're on a board in a great community, and I include the administration in that. I mean, and the parents, they really power it. And I'll tell you something for folks who may wonder also, I'll add because it kind of fits with this. The majority of the email or communications that we receive, it's been my experience, I assume it's been the others as well, is very positive. You'll occasionally get communications that are not positive. Whenever anybody types in all caps or starts off, with with some sort of nickname or something, that's not good. And I remember during the pandemic, I had two emails in the same week. One saying, thank you for your vote. You were, one of the only adults in the room. Same night, something from somebody saying that if there were any juvenile teen suicides, I was personally responsible. No other board members, me. So I received those two emails the same night. And so people have different perspectives, but for the most part, it's very positive. The community, I think, values what school board members do, even if they don't always agree with us. And the community has typically been, in our township, with a few exceptions, able to sniff out people who really care and those who just want to monetize this, a position on the board. And they know it. They typically know it.
I think
that's my 2 cents.
I think Don said something that I just want to get to a little more. And a really well-functioning school board, you are absolutely right, Don. That is an incredible high. And it's not easy. For me, the hallmark of a really great school board is they come together, they argue, they may be coming from 5 different positions on an issue. But once you make that vote, you've got to remember as a school board, you only function as a body. And once you make that vote, a great school board, everyone gets on board. You don't keep battling the discussion you had beforehand, because once you've spoken with your votes, you've spoken as one. And at that point, you move forward with the superintendent. And it's hard sometimes. And Don and I didn't always vote the same on the board, but Don and I we always knew what we were doing was for the good of the district and the children. And I got to work on a board that functioned really well for 2 years and a board that didn't function so well for 2 years. And yeah, you come to appreciate the high functioning board.
All right. Does anyone have any commentary or questions in the audience? Feel free to unmute yourself and join the conversation. You've heard a little bit about, the school board candidate committee, and I think too, it's being on school board is a big job, but it sounds like it's a rewarding job, is what I'm hearing from all of you. That's just what I'm getting out of this.
If I can just say one thing real quickly, 30 seconds. It's a very doable job. That's the thing. For busy people can handle a lot on their plates. I think probably everybody in this call, that's their life, right? And in some way, shape, or form, you can get it done. Dr. Morvildi, our previous superintendent, used to say that unfortunately in Washington Township, we make serving on the board look too hard. And that's because people generally attack it. We love it, but it is very doable. And I think probably everybody in this call would be willing to talk with people in the future too, if they have questions and just want an honest, unvarnished answer.
I would like to add something to that, which is to say that it is, I thought it was very, very important and helpful that I had a very supportive spouse. And I know I'm not the only one to say that. That's what, Justice Ginsburg attributed her career to, was having a spouse who was willing to cook and clean and take care of the other people. And so I think it's doable with that kind of support. And I know not everybody has a spouse, and that doesn't mean they can't do it, but I would say, because I was in a position, I mentioned, both my parents were pretty much out of commission while I was running and on the school board. I kind of wished that I had, when people asked, what can I do to support you? I wished I had asked if they were willing to, help with childcare, because the number of nights that the couple of struggles I had where it didn't look like my husband was going to get home in time, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And my son might have to come with me, which he would really, really hate, there are some things that could help. And I think securing that sort of support would have been smart on my part. But
well, that's an excellent point. And that's something to consider, that, what is that something to support for people who are on the board going forward, right? Like maybe that's just, that you can somehow find childcare or get the access to that you need. Does anyone have anything else they would like to ask? So why should parents care about school board?
I would go back to what I said before about that I was pretty sure that if the people who were already planning to run were elected, that I would see within the course of that year a decrease in the quality of my child's education. So, because there are people, as we discussed earlier, that don't believe in public education. There's actually long-standing plans to dismantle public education. It sounds like something only a conspiracy theorist would say, but it happens to be true. And so if you value public education, it's so important to be vigilant about it by protecting it, by making sure that people who do care about it are the ones making those decisions. And, you know, I just admire the heck out of Shelley because she's put so much into spreading that message. But it's important. I think that's the most significant reason why it's important.
You want people who can look at an issue objectively, even though all of us are very impassioned about certain issues, right? And you need that on the board. And there are, you know, whenever people say there are people out there who want to do us harm or do us ill, that's the reality. And every election we talk about it, but there are conversations occurring right now that are dishonest about what's going on in our schools. And that's why we need parent council and our teachers and parents who care to continue to analyze this, because we've obviously moved into this new world where people you know, actually argue about things like alternative facts, like that's a thing. And since the facts don't matter to people in you know, in retail politics, we need to keep reminding our parents and all of these networks that we have that they really do matter, right? You know, and we need to continue to have those conversations. That's why what the board does matters. One school board member who wants to, just one, who wants to make things difficult can at least slow things down and impede the process. And we can have different degrees of knowledge about what's going on, and we can care about different issues, but we need to continue to have people who, as I've always said, are just reasonable community voices. You don't have to be educational experts, folks who will listen to a difficult idea, listen to proposals for change that they wouldn't have thought of before they were on the board. And as I say, our administration works with school board members so we can understand and analyze and maybe agree.
So this is where I get to make Don teary-eyed, because this
Oh,
is
no.
my big thing about why we should care about school boards. And Don referred to this earlier, and I truly believe that our public schools are where we become Americans. And I'm not talking about our kids sitting in civics class and learning about our system of government. I mean, it's where we come together as a community and learn to be Americans together and make decisions that impact all the people in our community. And if we cannot, there's actually something in Maya Angelou's, one of her memoirs, about talking about her coming to realize that this is about all our children, and that this person over here that I may disagree with has a child that they care about just as deeply as I do. And it's us. If we cannot educate our children together, how on earth can we be a nation together? How can we be a city together? And it's so important for people to care about the school board, because this is where it happens, people. This is where it's on the ground, affecting you so closely and your children. And it's just one of the most important things I think we can do. And I know sometimes you can sound dark about what's going on in our state legislature, but Washington Township has always given me a huge amount of hope. And the fact that there's all these people watching this tonight, and that parent council exists and is doing what it's doing, that says so much about this community. So that's my big thing.
I think several of us are getting teary-eyed, I think, maybe.
I'm in total agreement. One thing that I always say is your schools are the foundation of your community. And without your, you know, so like when the referenda were going through and people go, oh, new desks and new paint that doesn't make the school, the teachers do. But you want schools that attract teachers, that are competitive with other schools. You want to make yourself, it sounds, you know, superficial, but in reality, we are competing with these charter schools and these you know, the vouchers are taking our schools away. And, you know, if your school isn't strong, your community isn't strong. So one of the reasons I care so deeply about school board before and now is because I live in this community and my children are growing in this community. And so without strong schools, what is it that I'm leaving behind for them? What kind of community are they going to have? So I ask myself, you know, when I'm having a bad day or something, a really rough issue comes up, and I go, why am I doing this? Then I remember I live here, and you know, we're all a part of this, and we're all learning and growing. And on top of that, I feel that representation matters. So parents should look at their school board and say, are they truly representing our community? Does our school board look like our community? So there's a whole bunch of different things that go into why a parent should matter, why it should matter to parents. Between representation and foundation, you know, and then it just builds from there. So I just feel like we need to make sure that our foundation is solid and then grow.
Excellent thoughts. Well, if there are no more questions popping up in the chat, or if no one has anything else for this panel discussion, you know, I think we can conclude this panel discussion part. I do want to segue before we end the meeting into just a quick public policy update. We're always following and watching the bills that are moving at the state legislature, and encouraging parents to use their voice on a variety of bills that have been introduced. And so I just wanted to let people know that there were 214 people signed up today to testify against House Bill 1134, which late yesterday was essentially, they like to say that it was stripped of all the bad stuff, but it was still a bad bill. And so it was a circus. I was down there. I didn't get a chance to testify, had my little spiel ready to go, but me and 200 other people did as well. So they concluded testimony. I don't think that they voted on the bill. The bill will be carried until next week. So that is something that is still out there. There's another bill that is referendum sharing with charter schools. That's House Bill 1072. That is something to keep watching. I'm hearing different things about it. It might be changing. There might be some modifications made, but it's important for us to have taxpayers, if possible, Washington Township taxpayers maybe testify on that bill. So feel free to reach out to us either through our email. We also have a public policy committee. Just feel free to reach out to us, however, whether it's Facebook, our website, and we can talk more about that. I will note that the Indiana Coalition for Public Education is hosting a President's Day of action. It's kind of more of a last minute thing, although ICPE hosts something every year. It is a bipartisan organization dedicated to public education in Indiana. And their day of action will be on Monday, February 21st. People can go listen to speakers. Dr. Jennifer McCormick will be there. Dr. Pat Payne, who is the equity leader in IPS, will be there. We'll have legislators speaking, both Republican and Democrat legislators speaking, and then an opportunity for attendees to engage with their legislators, whether it's delivering a postcard to their office or trying to speak with them one-on-one. And so that will be a really great opportunity. And I would encourage, if people can get the day off, I know we're off school, it might be kind of a neat field trip for kids to go see the State House and get involved and kind of see the process. The legislators are there, they'll be in session, things will be bustling and moving. So that might actually be a really great experience, a learning experience for people. So that's coming. And then next month we have March 16th will be our next meeting. We have not solidified the final topic yet, so stay tuned for that. That's coming. And what am I forgetting, board? Anything? I may be spacing. I'm kind of, like I said, tired brain today. So I think that's all we have for this evening. We did mention in our event and in our newsletter that we could stay on after. If people can certainly drop off and go on with their lives, but if there are folks who want to stick around and just kind of have an informal chat about maybe more about school board or getting involved in the committee, we'll linger a bit after this and be happy to talk with anyone. And then, of course, if you don't feel comfortable doing that and you just want to email or reach out to any of our attendees, we will have their information when we post the link for the chat. If anybody wants to reach out to our speakers today, I think that they would be happy to talk with you. I think that's accurate. I'm seeing all the heads nodding. So yeah, so feel free to log off. We'll end the meeting now, and then we'll stick around for a few minutes for some informal chat. It's not the same as going to a pub or going to a restaurant, but we'll try tonight. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists for being here. And thank you to the administration for joining us tonight too.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, and so Lori, I see one thing we didn't talk about is the impact serving on the board has on your own children. Oh, yes, navigating as having a school board parent. Oh, yes, that's an interesting thought. Deirdre can relate, right? Your kid either loves it or hates it.
Yeah, oddly, we were so we are due to visit West Lane in 2 weeks. And during the, hey, I just got my locker discussion, I said, oh, I get to come and tour your school. And I'm all excited because my older child used to love when I showed up at Nora or Northview and have lunch with him and all that fun stuff. And of course, Noah has been navigating this pandemic since 4th grade. So visiting school is not a thing that parents have been able to do. So he's not used to that. And I said, yeah, and before I could even say, I'll see where you are and pop in and just wave, he goes, please don't embarrass me.
Exactly.
So I can say, my oldest child was very comfortable with my involvement in the district until he got to high school. And then he politely asked me to back away so that he could establish some autonomy. And I've actually chosen a different path for Noah. He came through Crooked Creek to West Lane instead of Nora to Northview because he was morphing into Nick's little brother. And so one thing that I always worry about, I know he's a good kid in spite of the preteen stuff that is starting to pop up. And he's very serious about education. That's just how we are in our house. School comes first. I always, when he gets a good report from school, I always go, yeah, I paid them.
Right.
Or he'll ask me, he goes, are they saying nice things about me because they're afraid because you're on school board?
Yeah.
So it's the constant reassurance that, no, you're actually a good kid. You follow the rules. You are serious about your schoolwork. You are not causing trouble at school. And they see that. And I have had to basically put dad at the forefront to make sure that dad is showing up for the teacher meetings rather than me, to make sure that dad is always present at orchestra things and that kind of stuff. I'm secretly grateful for masking right now because most people don't know who I am when I have my mask on. And so it doesn't cast a shadow over him. Hey, and I never, ever, ever want people to feel intimidated because a school board member has showed up. I went back and forth with myself for several weeks about being part of PTO. But I decided in the long run, I am still a parent. So if you need a volunteer, I'm going to be there, if my schedule permits. However, dad has become the primary parent at school rather than me, to allow him to have some sense of normalcy as a student in our schools.
Yeah, that's really good advice, Deidre. We ended up doing the same thing, right? Because no matter, you may think you're taking your school board hat off, but to that staff member, to that teacher, you're still a school board member, and you're putting undue stress on these employees. And really, it was hard for me to back off and take that back seat and let Blake do it. And there were times my kids wanted me to, talk to the principal about this, or, hey, can I get into school? I forgot my books. And can you, no, no. That's not how that works. Yeah.
A lot of it, I think, just works through mutual respect, like you would expect. Most school board members, and Deirdre and I haven't been together long enough, but I presume she'd be, from what she just said, exactly the same way. But I know that Lori and Sherry both were like this. When we go to visit a school, we always check in with the principal, not because we're walking around taking secret notes, not because we're there to foment dissent or anything like that, but because it's respect. You're in their building, and you want people to feel relaxed and not get keyed up. Not because we're pretending that we're at some other different level, but because it just is about treating other people with respect. And I feel like we do that in this township.
Yeah, that whole parenting angle I had not processed in my brain, but that's an interesting, yeah.
I think John
Makes
my-
sense.
and I both went through some heartache with that. And
Yeah, it's hard.
you gotta, I think that's something you really need to be aware of. And I really think the staff has always been, for the most part, really supportive of us and our kids, and are aware that our kids might be under a little extra pressure sometimes.
Daniel.
So my experience with that parent and child thing was a little bit different because my son struggled. I mean, he was a very bright kid and very capable, but not always a good performer, and he had I think maybe Deirdre, did you mention having a child who was both maybe gifted and had learned some kind of learning disability. And I had that struggle too. And my son, he was not an A student, and we really didn't know if he was going to make it. I mean, we desperately wanted him to get out of to graduate high school, but we didn't really know if he was going to make it, because fortunately North Central offered him a lot of things that he really needed, like jazz band and a radio show. And those things helped him get through. But there were times when I found it very awkward to be on a board with people who had high achieving kids, and I wasn't sure. I suspect that put a little extra pressure on my son. Not that we ever told him you have to get A's. That wasn't like a thing in our family, but he felt like we were saying that anyway, because it was clear that education was important to us. So, and things vary with your kids. Obviously, everyone knows that. But
Loretta Connor, who was on the board for a while, also, she used to say that she had two children with completely different experiences. One, she would go through the front door of the school to collect the trophies. The other one, she would put on her sunglasses and hold her head down as she walked in, because she was surely there for some sort of disciplinary conference or something. And we all know what that's like. Her kids are.
It's funny you would mention Loretta Connor. Her daughter is they're both my sorority sisters, but I actually crossed with her daughter. And so I know those stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. My son, but by the same token, I do appreciate that the teachers, at first I wasn't sure, but I feel like I get the truth about what my children are doing in the buildings. It gives me a little unfair advantage about discipline, because they know not to misbehave because people are watching, because I am their mom. So it works in that regard as well. It pushed the older one to get his mind right, if for lack of a better phrasing.
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right. Darlene. Feel free to unmute if you want. I think you're asking a question about a pressing issue or what is the most pressing issue? Do you mean for school board members? So, oh, you mean like district wide? Well, we're going to try to not focus on the whole. I mean, we can certainly talk about it, but really maybe with school board and just generally, I think maybe you mean.
Yes,
Oh, okay. And you're a teacher, is that right?
I am, but I'm not an MSDWT teacher.
Oh, okay. So you
Yeah.
teach in another district, but have kids
Yes.
in school here.
Yes.
So what
Right.
school are you guys at or were kids at?
West Lane now,
Okay,
and I
cool.
have a 21 NC graduate.
Awesome.
This is, I will say this, just to start, this will be a much longer meeting if we get into any analysis of these issues at all, any. But I will say, wow, that's a hard question to answer, and that's not trying to avoid it. But we're obviously still in the pandemic. Thank God above that the variant that we're dealing with now seems to be, at least for the vaccinated, much less serious. And thank God that the curve is going the right direction. We really do celebrate that. The board, the superintendent keeps us very much informed, even beyond whatever news or program or programs we're watching about where the data is. But we're watching that and trying to still address those issues and starting to get more email and feedback on whether we should still be masking, et cetera. That's there. And then if that's not enough, we're talking about school hours, an issue that's been an issue in the township for a long time. I mean, good grief, pick your poison. And we also have construction going on everywhere in the township, which presents a host of issues. So I'd be hard pressed to say. Most of us didn't think that we'd be serving on the board during a pandemic, and where every decision you make, kind of like school hours, makes you a lot of friends and a lot of enemies. I used to have a colleague I worked with, and he said that we all come into this life, whatever challenges we have, that's accurate. We also come in with a certain amount of goodwill. And the question is how quickly we burn through it. And on a school board, that's an important question, but you just keep going.
Thank you. I heard what you said. You said construction, the pandemic, masking, unmasking,
school hours.
School hours, yeah, the big vote that's coming up. Is there anything else? Like, do any of the other members have like some thoughts on like, thank you though, Don.
Sure, absolutely.
Do any of the other members have any issues that they think are kind of pretty heavy? Not to go into, again, analysis. I'm just wondering like what the big issues are. Being in another district, I know a lot about that district. And then my kids are in this district. And so I'm just kind of trying to put my finger on the pulse.
When people ask me that question and they go, what's the most pressing issue? My first response is always all of them. Because it's so fluid and changing so fast that it could honestly make your head spin. So, we were dealing with having everyone back at school and all of the different things that come with a dynamic of having kids who had never been in school full time. I saw a chart recently that said when was the last year each child had a normal school year. And it's fascinating because my son is in 6th grade and his last normal school year was 3rd grade. So we're catching up on 3 years of stuff. And it's really hard to quantify it because there's so much stuff. Most of it, I working in healthcare, I have COVID fatigue because I feel like the answer to everything is, COVID. And, but the reality is COVID just opened up this Pandora's box of issues that we just try to navigate to the best of our abilities, making sure that we are considering all of the students, not just, okay, the middle schoolers are really struggling, and then not even looking at what's happening at elementary and high school. But I love our administration because they really look at their big picture thinkers. So that has helped not necessarily squeeze it in, but it has helped us have a little more focus. But it really is a Pandora's box right now, to Don's point. We'd probably be here until the board meeting on Wednesday if we started talking about them all.
Thank you, Deirdre.
Anybody
Well,
else?
I've heard quite a lot, and I'm going to go ahead and disconnect. But thank you guys a lot
Yeah,
for
and
this
feel free-
conversation.
Yeah, and feel free, I would say too, to always, if you can, check out what the school board is up to. It's important to pay attention to the school board meetings. They're all recorded. And then, on the district's website, you can see things like the fruits of that work, the work of the school board. In other words, the district strategic plan, the short term, the long term, the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, and how we're supporting various subgroups of students, whether it's achievement issues or social and emotional issues. So there's really just a ton. They're just doing so much, and it seems so overwhelming. But to see it in kind of presentation format and digestible format, whether it's on the website or learning about it in a school board meeting, I think is really really pretty helpful. So if you have any more questions though, or you can always reach out to us, always drop us an email. Through our website, we have email. Through Facebook, we have the messenger option. We're just always, anybody on our board is welcome to chat with any parent or caregiver at any time. And then I know our school board members are always accessible for conversation. So I'm thankful that you guys were all here tonight. I'm going to close it out. We're at 8:58. I appreciate your time, and I know it's been a long evening, and we'll look forward to more conversations going forward. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shelley and Parent Council, and thank you, current board members. You guys are living through interesting times, and I admire what you're doing so very much.
For sure.
Some precedented times.
Unprecedented, right?
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Darlene. Bye-bye.
Have a great night.
Bye.